Yeah.
You can go back up.
Most please having problem syncing. You want help?
Hi.
help?
Oh, in a minute, I'm gonna start the meeting and then maybe, okay? Good evening, everybody. Thank you so very much for coming to this meeting that I think is pretty important to all of us. I'm Claudia Valentino. I'm the president of the Forest Hills Community and Civic Association, and I'd like to begin by having us stand and pledge allegiance, okay? So you can all rise. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And so the pledge helped us with our technical problems. That's makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I've got notes, and I timed myself, and I'll try to be fast, so give you a sense of what we're doing tonight. I'll just say that the meeting is being filmed, and that's the kind of thing you have to let people know. We also have someone here from the Queen's Chronicle who's very nicely come to cover our meeting, which I appreciate. So, tonight's been organized very, very quickly. The information that we got about a city council vote, an upcoming city council vote, only reached us last Tuesday night, and so we quickly pulled ourselves together to have this meeting. Thank yous are essential first. I thank Pastor Frank Schwartz of Our Lady of Mercy here for responding immediately when we needed to have the meeting. I also thank our neighbor, Anna Marie Prono, for helping make the connection and make that happen. And also, Sue Finley wants no thanks, but I'll thank her anyway. She's been a sounding board along with Anna Marie, helping me to pull this together as I've done a lot of research to help inform us all, so I'm grateful. Announcements. I'd like to remind everyone and encourage you not to miss our annual Memorial Day Parade, put on by our own American Legion, Continental Post 1424. It is always held every year on the Sunday of the 3-day weekend. It's one of the oldest Memorial Day parades in New York State. So this year it's May 26th. There's a ceremony at 11 a.m. at the Legion Hall at Ascan and Metro. And then the parade itself kicks off at 12, and they walk from Ascan, they march from Ascan almost to Woodhaven, and then there are dedications at Remsen Cemetery, which is opposite Trader Joe. So I hope you can all come, because it's going to be great. Apparently they've got extra bands this year. I'd also like to say that Heidi Chain, who wasn't able to join us tonight, will be holding her monthly 112 Precinct Council meeting on Wednesday, May 15 at 7:30 at the Legion Hall also on Metro in Ascan. The police captain from the 112 attends, our community affairs officers attend, and you can ask questions and get information about safety in the neighborhood. It's a good meeting, and she has pizza. Sorry, I have no pizza. So we're here tonight at this emergency town hall so that our voices can be heard on the Mayor's City of Yes plan. In order for each of us to be able to form an opinion and decide what we'd like to do, it's important to first understand what is proposed and what is at stake here for us. But just know that this affects the entire city. It affects neighborhoods, not just in Queens, but across the 5 boroughs. The economic portion alone, just to give you some sense of what people have attempted to plow through, the economic portion alone, which is the part that I'll talk about, is 1,157 pages. The housing portion, which our guest, Paul Graziano, is going to discuss in a bit, is longer than that. We're not expected to understand. We're not expected to be able to get through it and handle it or stop it, but here we are. And as I say, the meeting's being filmed, just so you know. So, the purpose of our meeting tonight is to introduce clarity. We have a special guest this evening to help with that. I've invited Paul Graziano to join us, and he has kindly agreed. He even canceled something for us tonight. Paul's a longtime civic activist, a lifelong resident of Queens, has a master's degree in urban affairs and planning from Hunter College, where I also went. He has taken on too many community battles to count. but he is always on the right side of things and a strong defender of neighborhoods just like ours. He has a presentation for us on the housing portion of City of Yes, and will speak in a bit. So tonight is a bit like school, and I'm very sorry about that. There won't be a quiz, but this is what's expected of us. With the length and complexity of these proposals, we have to dig down on some kind of possibly boring subjects, but it's worth it. I'm going to run through the economic portion and also explain a bit about zoning. Zoning is the key to understanding the City of Yes plans that threaten 1- and 2-family neighborhoods. Essentially, we have actions we'd like you to take, but it's essential that you understand first. So zoning. The Forest Hills Community and Civic Association rezoned our neighborhood just about 20 years ago. Why? And I'm talking about the area from Dartmouth to Union Turnpike and from Ascan Avenue to roughly Selfridge. Why did we downzone our neighborhood? Because we would drive around. Former President Barbara Suchinski and I would drive around on a Saturday. We both live on the same block. And we'd see areas that looked like ours with a lot of strange construction going on. What did we see? Businesses in the middle of the block, tacked onto houses every which way. Businesses tucked into corner houses, obviously with signage you could tell. Houses being built, extending the property line to the back fence, going out this way to the side property lines, and also going up, blocking sunlight and towering over the neighborhoods, and not to mention increasing density. So single and double family houses were suddenly like housing, 4 different families. Pave-overs of front gardens to provide sidewalk parking was also happening, blocking pedestrian paths. So there'd be the gardens with cars this way, that way, the other way. A senior or somebody with a baby carriage couldn't get down the street. This happens to be illegal right now, just so you know, because it's considered green space. It's illegal since like 1929, because they knew that we needed our gardens to collect rainwater to prevent flooding. So yeah, all kinds of pave-overs. So we realized, the Civic realized, like, what's going on in these other areas? Why is this able to happen? And what about our area? So we realized we better look at our zoning. So we looked at our zoning, and what we discovered was that, like, the whole back door was open on us, because our zoning at that time allowed for, like, tear downs of our houses and construction of apartment buildings like 7 stories. So as a result of that, we took the necessary steps to zone our area here, the confines of which I just told you. And essentially, you need to understand that the process by which we did it wasn't abracadabra, we just changed our zoning. No, it's a highly specific official process. There's specific paperwork and documentation that has to be filled out. It has to go through zoning and planning of the community board itself, Queen City Planning, and city planning. So it's completely approved. It was okay, officially, okay? We didn't make it up. So this is the key to understanding all aspects of City of Yes. City of Yes is a truckload of proposals that rest on the principle of destroying all zoning, particularly in 1- and 2-family neighborhoods like our own. There would no longer be community review of projects, and all projects, which I will describe in a moment, would be termed as of right. As of right means rubber stamp okays for things we don't want. Okay, here are some nuts and bolts. The economic portion has 18 proposals. They're all over the lot, and there are ones that I'm not going to talk about. Some of them have to do with, like micro delivery of Amazon packages, loading bays of new construction, things like that. I have no problem with any of that. But the ones that I'm concerned about, and also are in a letter that I would ask people to sign if they would be willing to, are the ones that have to do with, for example, in a corner house, being able to put a bodega. That's the term that the Department of City Planning uses, to put a bodega or a store or a business in a corner house using 2,500 square feet of that house. Imagine the deliveries for all that is sold in a convenience store like that. Imagine the foot and car traffic, hours of operation. Perhaps they have lotto. Maybe they need a cash machine. And what of commercial garbage hauling? So the city council claims they may not go ahead with this particular proposal. Right now, everything is draft and very wishy-washy, and who knows? We have no guarantees, and we must be heard and must oppose it. Second problem proposal is allowing businesses to be run out of homes in the middle of a block. At the moment, you can use 25% of your home for that purpose. But City of Yes proposes that 49% of a house in the middle of the block can be used as a business. You can have 3 employees, and it expands the categories that are allowable, and the ones that they keep talking about are nail salon, barbershop, hairdresser. When do people go to the hairdresser and get their nails done? At night and all day Saturday and Sunday. So, a lot of us share common driveways. Do we really want this? The foot and car traffic from that, the lack of privacy for neighbors adjacent to a home used that way would be unacceptable. Now, in case there are folks here who also live in apartment buildings, I want to touch on 2 other proposals for apartment dwellers. One would allow commercial business activity. Now, you know when you walk along an apartment building, there's businesses on the ground floor, right? The City of Yes wants to allow commercial activity on the 2nd floor, okay? The fire department is completely freaking out about that. They're not happy. And then the other proposal is that bars and restaurants be able to be located on the top of apartment buildings. Now, as I say, the city council, right. We can, I can talk about that in a minute, but anyway. I know, you have to laugh because this is kind of, makes you want to kill yourself, basically. So, the thing is that they can revise, they can do this, they can change the number of employees in the middle of the block to 2 from 3, which is what they're possibly talking about, because they know that neighborhoods are flipped out about it. But here's the bottom line. It destroys our protective zoning. The minute any of those uses come in, it de facto removes our residential status and changes us to mixed use, allowing commercial development. Now, Paul's going to get into the separate housing portion, and then your hair's really going to stand on end. But this is just the economic development portion that would affect houses. So what I've done, as we could try to come up with some action plans here. So what I've done is I have written a letter to Lynn Schulman, CC to members of the City Council, Speaker Adrian Adams, who's in love with this plan, Senator Adabo, and also Assemblyman Hevesy, because there's a lot of this sort of plan coming through Albany as well, to let them know how we feel. And I'm just going to summarize. Essentially, this is to Lynn. The letter, our councilwoman here in District 29. The letter comes to you today to address an urgent matter. As you know, the City Council is preparing to vote the week of May 20, which we just found out, and that's why you're all here, on the economic portion of the City of Yes plan. You will cast a vote. While revisions to the plan have been suggested by the zoning professionals of the City Council, the proposals tied to neighborhoods zoned as residential must either be stricken entirely from the plan, or you must cast a no vote on the plan as a whole. Then specifically, I say all current zoning covering areas of 1 and 2 family homes now classified as residential must remain in place. Zoning must not be changed de facto to mixed use. And then I go into the detail about the fact that we changed our own zoning and we did it the right way, so what are you messing around for? These current zoning designations must remain in place. They are not out of date, because the plan keeps referring to the fact that zoning around New York City happened in 1960 and is completely out of date. That's not true. I did it about 22 years ago, and unfortunately for them, I didn't drop dead, and I can still say I did it. So, and I keep telling them, sorry, I'm still here. So anyway, and I even found my paperwork the other day and all the photos that I took. Okay, and then I say the corner stores, okay, must not be allowed under any circumstances. If allowed, only real estate speculators will benefit, and community comedy and neighborliness, cooperation, quality of life, and safety will be severely impacted. And then about commercial deliveries and everything, we don't want it. And then as to businesses located mid-block, I say absolutely not, no way. And then also say that the impact on surrounding homes from those mid-block businesses would be absolutely impossible to bear. So, and this is to let her understand that we know that there's financial difficulty, economic difficulty in the city right now. We're not uncaring people, okay? Because we get accused of that. Every time we object to something, we're told, oh, you know, we're all whatever. I don't know, lack empathy? I don't know. As to outcome, economic revitalization of our business corridors is important, since many stores now stand empty. Therefore, there's no reason to begin to cite business activity within areas zoned as residential. Okay? Okay, just a little more, and then you've got him. Okay. It amounts to New York City government overreach, demolishes the principles of community review, agency, and self-determination, discredits property rights, and disrespects the knowledge base that neighborhood people possess of their own areas. To buy and maintain a home in this city is a brave and optimistic choice involving considerable sacrifice. The way of life we have chosen must not be destroyed. We do not wish to urbanize our residential neighborhoods, because our Community Board 6 has people on it that voted in favor of all of this, and they think we need to be urbanized, but we don't, okay? This is a once-in-a-generation vote. It is essential that you as our councilperson vote the will of your constituents. We will firmly support you as you support our residential neighborhoods. To reiterate, you must vote no on the economic portion of the City of Yes unless the plan is dramatically revised to protect current zoning. So this is the letter, and as you're all going, if you choose to, there's a way of signing, you know, how you identify yourself on a petition. So we're gonna make a petition out of these. And so at the end, when everybody's saying goodbye, we can do that. Now, I'm going to introduce Paul, and Paul has a special presentation for us on the housing portion. But are there any small questions in the meantime? Because we'll take questions at the end.
Just quickly, some of us from CV6 have been rezoned to Bob Holden's area, so can you send that letter to him as well?
Yes, I will. Well, it's going to all council people.
Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
Could you also add the borough president? Because he seems to be a very big proponent.
Okay, well, I'll write him in. You're right, you're absolutely right, and that's a complete oversight on my part. And
He's the one that also assigns the members to the community board.
Right, borough president, she's absolutely
No,
right.
she's right, and it's an oversight on my part, and thank goodness.
There have been real estate developers appointed to CV6 in the past few years.
Yeah, we know.
And they come here from Manhattan because they want to make this like
Well,
Manhattan.
let me, you had, I wanted to go into Paul, but let me just say, in general, you know, I'm a bit of a geek, I'm a journalist, and I do research, and I find out all kinds of wacky stuff. So, this plan is an insult to New Yorkers, because New York should develop its own plans. This stuff comes from places like California, Oregon, Houston, and all the rest of it. So it just sort of swept across the country and got picked up here. Some of the zoning, some of the Department of City Planning people making the presentations at the community boards, one woman is actually from Oregon, and she only lives here for 2 years. So why is she telling us how we're supposed to live? So anyway, but I do want to get to Paul, because if you think mine's intense, what I'm telling you is intense, this is really, and Paul's got the Can everyone hear okay?
Can you hear me?
We can hear him and you. We can't hear these people's comments. You need to repeat what they say, but we can't hear it.
Okay, Okay, sir, we'll make sure that when people speak, I will repeat them. I think everyone can hear me, yes? Yes. Yes, my wife says I have a resonant voice. I think she just means I'm loud. So, hi, I'm Paul Graziano, and thanks for having me here tonight. And it's a great crowd. I am going to talk a little bit about the commercial, and I'll go into a little more detail, because we're going to talk about not just the nuclear bomb that is the city of Yes for housing opportunity, but how the economic opportunity piece is really not a separate part of this. It was done in several packages, but they actually are the same thing, and they intertwine with each other. And I think it's very, very important for the public to understand that. So let me give you just a brief background of how we have come to this point. And just briefly, I'm from Flushing. I've lived there my whole life. I live on the same block I've lived on my whole life. I live next door to my parents. Oh boy. Okay, so about, as Claudia was saying, about 25 years ago, really 30 years ago, there was a real movement across the city for neighborhoods to help better protect themselves from outdated zoning, which is what they're calling the zoning we have now, which is not. But the zoning that was put in place in 1961, we had a zoning resolution for the city of New York, okay? And we still operate under that, but there has been huge amendments to that over the years. So starting in the 90s, many of you probably remember, how many of you have lived here since the 90s? Okay, 80s, 70s, 60s. Okay, so all right. So we're 50s, 40s, 30s, yeah, I got it. So I mean, I've lived in my community since the day I was born, so that's 1971. So that should tell you how old I am. When we started doing this when I was in my 20s, the zoning that was in place from 1961 wasn't really matching communities. They were very broad. So we started seeing, as Claudia was saying, a lot of demolitions of houses and neighborhoods all over the city going, how could that happen? That was a one-family neighborhood. Oh, no, it's actually zoned R6. R6 allows for very tall apartment buildings. So there was a real movement to do this from the civic organizations in particular, and Queens was definitely the leader on this. I can just say that for sure, because I was involved. And finally, about 25 years ago, it really picked up steam, and during the Bloomberg administration, we had what I could call a willing partner with the Department of City Planning to look at our communities and do real community-based planning for the first time in the history of the city, as far as I know. And all of the communities that were rezoned, and most of Queens was rezoned. I'll just tell you that. I was involved in almost every single contextual rezoning that was done. The community was deeply, deeply involved. Did they get everything they wanted? No. Did they get most of what they wanted in most cases? Yes. Were there trade-offs? Oftentimes. So for example, Austin Street got upzoned dramatically. But that was because this area and the other side were downzoned or contextually rezoned. So there was a balance that was done. So any elected official and any propagandist that we're dealing with today in city government is just not telling the truth. We were really careful, fine-grained approach, building by building, lot by lot. Starting about 3.5 years ago, there was a concerted effort to turn this all upside down. This is and Claudia was right, this is a national trend. There are people and communities across the country and political forces and real estate forces in particular that want to eliminate single-family zoning and two-family zoning, densify everywhere, get rid of cars, all of these things, and mostly for the benefit of the developers, even though they paint it as being for humanity. Okay, so let's just be honest about it. 3.5 years ago, we had a speaker named Corey Johnson. Do you guys remember him? Yep. Okay. So it was right before the holidays in December, and I remember turning on the news and going, what's he doing there? I'd never seen him on a press conference before. And he said, everybody, I've come up with a solution to all of our housing problems. And I have just introduced the best new land use plan in the history of New York City. It's called Planning Together. Okay. So being the curious planner that I am, I looked at this plan, I said that in quotations. The plan was to eliminate single-family zoning across the city of New York and force every community board to upzone every decade in perpetuity. And if the council person and the community board couldn't agree on which area to sacrifice, there would be a new city planning above the current city planning. And I called him a Wizard of Oz-like character, who would designate an area for you. So myself and a woman named Renee Hill, who is the former chair of Community Board 12 and head of the Addisley Park Civic Association, we created a group, and we went and hit most of the community boards when these hearings were happening in early 2021. Of course, this was during COVID. It was all Zoom meetings, etc. But we got the vast majority of community boards to say, what the heck is this, right? And there was one public hearing and the whole thing died. And it turns out he was using that as a platform to run for controller. He ran against Brad Lander. Well, Brad Lander is the controller, not Corey Johnson. So enough said. Then we had a new governor, Hochul. So she came in, and the first thing she did in 2022 in her State of the State address is she said one line. And again, I'm also, like Claudia, a bit of a nerd, let's face it. I'm watching the State of the State address, the 100 people who aren't in government watching it. And she says one line, and the line is, we're gonna get rid of outdated zoning laws that are holding back housing in the state of New York. So, once again, I look at her report, and what does it say? Eliminate single-family zoning in the entire state of New York. Force every municipality in the state of New York to allow accessory dwelling units, ADUs. We're going to talk about those tonight. Take away home rule, which is enshrined in the state constitution. We are one of the few states where actually local government has as much power as state government. We live in a pretty weird state. Most states, the state government has much more power than the local government. But in New York, it's pretty 50-50. And transit-oriented development, increasing density near originally just Metro North and Long Island Railroad stations, but then all subway stations. And blanket amnesty for all illegal conversions in the city of New York. And a lot of other things, but those were the things that caught my attention, right? I live in a neighborhood similar to this in Flushing, so that should tell you everything. So I created a group called Save One Family New York, and I started contacting not just people in Queens who I know, and in Staten Island and Brooklyn and the Bronx, but also Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, Rockland, Ithaca, Buffalo, Rochester, you name it. And in a month, we got her to take everything out, except for the blanket amnesty for illegal conversions, which was eventually pulled out of she stuffed it all into the budget. This is what she tries to do. She's stuffing legislation into the budget, which is totally wrong. So we got that out. I warned everybody, and I'm a nonpartisan person, I said, if she is reelected in 2022, this is coming back. Last year, you might have heard of something called the Housing Compact. Anybody? One person? Okay. Well, it was all over the news. Remember the budget was late like 30 days last year? Yeah, there were two reasons. Bail reform and the Housing Compact. Because what she wanted to do was everything the year before, plus force every municipality to increase housing supply every single year in perpetuity. And if they didn't do it, then the state would come in and designate areas, just like that Wizard of Oz, to upzone and build new housing. So we worked with our senators and assembly members, and they refused to sign off on this, and she refused to stop, and finally she gave in when they walked out of negotiations. And that was when she finally capitulated. It came back again this year. You guys probably don't even know this. She tried to legalize the basements and cellars again this year. And the only reason that it didn't happen is that several assembly members and senators, particularly from Queens, Assembly Member Ed Braunstein, Neely Rosick, Alicia Heineman, and Senator Leroy Comrie, and others, told them, we will not sign off on this unless you create a program that doesn't make every community board allow this. So they created a pilot program. There's one community board in Queens where this might happen. That's Long Island City and Sunnyside, and my response is safe travels, right? The other 13 boards here don't want this. And most of the boards in the city also don't want it. So, now we get to the city of yes. The mayor came up with this plan within the first week of coming into office. He created a group called the BLAST Committee. He's very good at acronyms and slogans. When he was the borough president of Brooklyn, his slogan was, build, baby, build. Okay? The BLAST Committee, followed by a list that the BLAST Committee created. The BLAST Committee was made up of all of his biggest contributors and donors. Construction companies, developers, housing groups, big commercial groups, etc. They came out with a list of about 120 items, a wish list, called Get Stuff Built. That was literally the name of it. And most of that today is the city of yes. That's what we're dealing with, a wish list from developers that may become reality. And if this happens, we're done. And I say that in all seriousness, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but this truly is an extinction event for all of our communities. And the rest of the state is watching what happens to us because the governor has promised that if the city of yes passes in New York City, she will bring this to every other corner of the state. She has stated this publicly. The mayor and the Department of City Planning have stated publicly that low-density neighborhoods are the cause of the housing crisis in New York City. They have stated publicly contextual zoned neighborhoods like Forest Hills, like where I live in North Flushing, like other places, Cambria Heights in Southeast Queens. That should have never happened. It was a mistake because it took away the ability to build wherever you want. And in fact, the zoning resolution itself was a mistake because it stopped apartment buildings from being built in 1- and 2-family zones. So today, I'm going to talk to you about the 5 biggest pieces to this. This document, as Claudia said, the first part of this was actually called carbon neutrality. That was passed in December, and that had to do with building efficiencies and new technology and energy efficiencies. Some of that was okay, some of it wasn't. Some of it was pretty bad, but it was sort of separate from the rest. The economic piece, 18 proposals, 1,127 pages long, which I've read backwards and forwards too many times. And the current one is 14 separate proposals, 1,386 pages long. Anybody who wants to read it, let me know. I'll be happy to give it to you. So, what we are dealing with here, as I said, is a city that has made it very clear that their ultimate goal is to densify every square inch of the city, particularly low-density communities. We are in the crosshairs, okay? This was actually on their website, and still is, on their Twitter feed from about X, whatever you want to call it, about 6 months ago. And they put up this picture that says 1989, which is supposed to be a play on Taylor Swift, which is pretty lame. But again, those kids from Iowa, you know, they're coming up with all kinds of things. So the thing that was said was this quote: "We've got bad blood with Robert Moses, and we've made a lot of progress to improve New York City zoning, but we're not out of the woods yet. That's why we're chasing our wildest dreams in City of Yes to shake exclusionary zoning off and say once and for all, welcome to New York." Okay. Does anybody have any idea how much of New York City is zoned single family? Anybody? Any idea? Take a guess.
30%?
30%? Anybody else? 20%?
5%.
What?
5%.
It's you're much better than my other audiences. They're like 80%, 15%, 15%, and another 9% is zoned two-family. That means that more than 75% of the city is zoned today multi-family, right? So if you look at a basic understanding, Seattle is 81% single family. Everything you see in pink or purple is single family, okay? Chicago, 79%. Portland, 77%. Portland, where that young woman was from, the one from city planning from 2 years ago. Los Angeles, 75%. Minneapolis, 70%. Even Washington, D.C., 36%. Okay? And New York City, 15%. And where is most of that single-family zoning? East of the Van Wyck Expressway. You guys are a little enclave in Kew Gardens and Richmond Hill and Forest Hills, but the vast majority outside of Howard Beach and your little area and a little bit in the Rockaways is east of the Van Wyck. If you take out east of the Van Wyck, there's hardly any single-family zoning left in the city of New York. Okay? And just to give you an idea, and this is what's going to happen here, 50% is zoned single-family east of the Van Wyck. Another 25% is zoned two-family. And this will all become a minimum of 3 families on every parcel. And that's what's going to happen here too. Every parcel of land will be allowed to have 3 units minimum. Okay? So then there's going to be transit-oriented development. And transit-oriented development will allow apartment buildings on all properties where they are mapped. On a wide street, every parcel will be allowed to have an apartment building if it meets a very large lot definition. Do you know what their large lot is? 5,000 square feet. Who lives in a property that's 5,000 square feet? Anybody? Who lives in a 4,000 square feet, 40 by 100 property? Okay. 20 by 100. There you go. So it would take basically a developer to buy 2 or 3 houses, tear them down, and be able to build an apartment building on that site. Okay? And if you're on a narrow street, it's a corner. But the corner is defined as the corner property and any other property that's attached to it. So if someone buys up 8 houses, they can do from the corner to that house. That's just in eastern Queens, and you can see a little bit where you guys are. These are where the transit zones are mapped. As you can see, it's an enormous amount. That's just in the 1 and 2 family zones today. And that's the low density multifamily zoning is in blue. That's where the transit zone would be. So it's a huge portion of Queens that would be affected by this. So let's just talk a little bit about Robert Moses. Generally speaking, not the best guy in the world, right? Has some baggage, let's say. He did some okay things. I always say, we may vilify him, but we wouldn't be here without the Jackie Robinson or the Cross Island, right? We'd be a different place. But he was a bit of a tyrant. These are some of his quotes. "Your principal error is this, to imagine that the people's views are of any importance at all. We must advance their fortunes without having any respect for their opinions." Sound familiar? You can draw any kind of picture you want on a clean slate and indulge your every whim in the wilderness in laying out a New Delhi, Canberra, or Brasilia. But when you operate in an overbuilt metropolis, you have to hack your way with a meat axe. And if you elect a matinee idol mayor, you're going to have a musical comedy administration. So my comments on that is, sounds like the Adams administration, sounds like the Adams administration, and sounds like the Adams administration. Now, there was another person who fought against him. Her name was Jane Jacobs. Anybody remember that name here? Okay. So, I always say to people, he was not a black-hearted villain and she was not a lily-white princess. It's not really that black and white on here. But she was definitely someone who fought for community. And Some of you may remember when Robert Moses, or heard stories about Robert Moses wanting to build an expressway called the Lower Manhattan Expressway that was going to go from the Holland Tunnel to, I believe, the Manhattan Bridge. And they were going to wipe out Tribeca and Soho in the process. Now remember, Tribeca and Soho at that time was abandoned in the 50s and 60s. It was a pretty desolate place. Her quote, "Cities grow up. They just happen, bit by bit. Hand a city to the planners and they'll make it a desert. Hand it to the people and they'll make it habitable." And as a planner, I 100% approve that statement, which is, we are the ones who should be deciding our future, not some people who are trying to impose it upon us. Okay. So, this came out 3 weeks ago. The Daily News. After you read this, does anybody have a subscription to the Daily News here? Good. Well, if you do, you might want to get rid of it after you read it. A home for us. However, what should be dismissed offhand is anything that too heavily emphasizes, quote, neighborhood character, property values, or fretting over increased density. These tedious arguments, are missing the point, which is that a lack of housing stock threatens affordability and quality of life in all of New York. And there's no way to dodge this by holding firm against development. The bucolic character of any particular neighborhood is going to matter little as the current residents are priced out. For those who desperately want to live in a suburb, I guess that's you guys, we'll remind you that there are several in the immediate vicinity of the 5 boroughs. This is New York City. That is from the editorial board of the Daily News. Now, at the single hearing of the City Council on economic opportunity, which is what Claudia was talking about at the beginning, Dan Garodnick, who's the chair of the City Planning Commission, and the guy who, his name is Matt, and I can never remember his last name, but the planner who was in charge of the economic piece, were sitting there being questioned by the City Council. And they went through a presentation that went on for about an hour. And at the end, the City Council was doing this. But they showed this slide, and I thought it would be good for you to see it. They were going on and on and on how important it was. They had reached out to so many community boards, and there's never been more outreach. We had 175 meetings. 170, no one's ever done anything like that before on this economic opportunity. Just to let you know, there are 59 community boards in New York City. That's 3 meetings per board. So it's not quite as amazing as the way he's describing it. And 4 of 5 borough presidents recommended to approve with conditions. That would be also Donovan Richards, one of the 4, okay? What he left out was something very important, that the vast majority of boards voted this down, okay? They voted economic opportunity down. And they didn't just vote it down, they voted it a hell no down. Okay? Of the 14 boards in Queens, the only boards that voted in favor was your board. Board 10, Ozone Park and Howard Beach, don't know how that happened. And boards 1 and 2, Long Island City and Astoria, which to me makes perfect sense. Okay. But the rest of the boards in Queens voted no. The Staten Island boards voted no. 2/3 of the boards in Brooklyn voted no. Most of the boards in the Bronx voted no. And a number of boards in Manhattan voted no. So he left out that very important point that the vast majority of boards were actually opposed to it. And even the ones that voted in favor voted with conditions, and most of those conditions were not met. So their votes turned to no. So it's something like 85% of the boards ultimately voted no. The Department of City Planning ignored all of this and made some minor modifications and said, here you go to the City Council. So let's talk a little bit. I'm going to revisit what Claudia said. This slide is what they showed to the community board. This slide, a picture and 1 sentence. 16 corner stores. Create a process to allow for small new bodegas and other locally serving storefronts in residential areas. That's not what the text said. The text, the zoning text, It's the only thing that matters. That's the law, not this pretty picture with a sentence. It said, all properties within 100 feet of a corner on every residential block in every residential zone in the city of New York can have up to 2,500 square feet. Commercial, office, storefront, retail. That is not what this says. Am I right or wrong?
You're right.
Okay. They showed this slide to the city council. More information closer to what it was, but the main point of this, it gives sole authority to the city planning commission. It takes away even the council, which is your elected official, from deciding this. No environmental review. And here it says, subject to both environmental review and community board approval. They were questioned by the council members, well, if the community board votes this down, are you going to vote this down? And he hemmed and hawed, tried to change the subject, and finally said, the community board is advisory only. Which they are. Community boards are advisory. So, here's an example. Okay, this is important for you to understand. This is Community Board 8, Jamaica Estates, Holliswood, Briarwood, Kew Gardens Hills, just on the other side of the park. I'm sure you're pretty familiar with it. About half of it is zoned single family, about a quarter of it is zoned 2 family, the rest of it is lower density, mostly garden apartments, multifamily. The area you see here is 1/4 of a mile from a commercial zone. Anything you see in gray. That has to do with a press release that the mayor put out that says, the reason we're doing this is because approximately 265,000 New Yorkers currently live in areas where a new corner store could not be located within a 1/4 mile of their home. So the area that doesn't have that is deepest Jamaica Estates, who certainly, I think you would know, don't want a corner store. And by the way, that number, 265,000, sounds like a huge number of people. It's 3% of the population of the city of New York. 3%. And when has the city ever done anything for 3% of the population? So, this just briefly shows you a map of the zoning. It's mostly single family and 2 family in this area. The darker areas are within a 1/4 mile. Let's take a quick look at a typical Jamaica Estates block. Looks similar to some of your areas, right? Big houses, some are really big houses, with green, lots of trees and green and curvy streets. Every single square you see there is where a corner store could be located. Okay? And I have other maps showing entire neighborhoods, showing what it looks like today and what it would look like under this proposal, including yours, which I'm going to show you in a minute. So I want to show you how the new housing proposals are going to interface with this commercial proposal. So currently, Jamaica Estates is zoned R12, single family, 5,700 minimum lot size, 5,700 square feet, 60 feet wide lots. You can build a single home, 0.5 FAR, floor area ratio. That's the size of the building to the size of the lot, right? So if you have a 5,000 square foot lot, you can build a 2,500 square foot house. That's what the zoning is. Currently, this is a very big piece of property. It's got a big house on it, 3,000 square foot house, 16,800 square foot lot. The guy right now, or the woman who owns this home, can sever off one side and build one family home there today on that 60 by 100 right there. The lot coverage is about 37 to 40%. Okay, 1 parking space. This is going to be the baseline. 3 homes, 3 2-family homes with a either attached accessory dwelling unit or a new house behind your house. That will be the baseline, and that will be in your R2 zones. That will be in your R3A zones here, your R3-1, your R4B. All of the zoning you have today in Forest Hills, it's the same thing. But I'm just showing this because it's very easily to illustrate, right? It's easy to illustrate this. There will be 60% lot coverage. It's like double the lot coverage you have today, 80% on corners. 0.75 FAR, so they're immediately giving 50%. Do you know what they're calling this? District fixes. District fixes, because, there's some people who own properties and they can't build it to the max. So we're gonna bring the zoning down to the lowest common denominator as a district fix. So your 40-foot wide lot is now gonna only need to be 30 feet wide. Your 3,800 square feet, this is in an R2 zone, only needs to be 2,800 square feet. We'll get rid of your side yards. We'll get rid of your backyards. We'll increase the floor area as of right. We'll get rid of your front yards. We'll allow you to build higher. We'll get rid of your green space and allow people to pave over everything. And we'll get rid of all parking requirements in the city of New York for every new residential building. Whether it's a one-family home or a 300-unit apartment building, we're going to get rid of all parking. Because, anybody? Cars are evil.
They want you on bikes.
And people who drive cars are very evil.
But we keep voting these people in.
But no, sir, that's the public rhetoric. The real rhetoric, the real reason is that every one of those parking spaces that they have to build costs the developer money. And the developers who put the mayor in office today said, we don't want to build parking. We don't want to have to require to build parking because we're losing money by giving that mandatory service to the people who live there. So think about it. If you live in an R6 zone and you build a 40-unit building, you need 20 parking spaces on site. Each of those parking spaces costs $50,000. So now I'm a developer and I say, well, I don't have to build, I can build the 40 units, but I don't need to put any parking in. I'm going to pocket that million. That's going to be an additional $1 million in profit for me. When I confronted the Department of City Planning last week about this at a community board meeting, their response was, oh, that's not going to happen. They'll build more units. Now, I know developers. Developers are business people and they want to make every penny that they can with the least amount of risk. If someone gives them a freebie, they're going to take it. Okay? So now, I've shown you the baseline. This is what's going to happen if you're in a transit zone. So now, all of a sudden, single and two-family zones will be allowed to have apartment buildings. 100% coverage on the corners, 80% on the mid-blocks, 1.0 FAR. So if you've got a 5,000 square foot lot, you can build a 5,000 square foot apartment building. And the number of units is divided by that number. It's called the dwelling unit factor, the DUF. They want to make all of those dwelling unit factors the number 500. So 5,000 divided by 500 is 10 units, where a one-family home used to be. So this property could accommodate 33 units on this property, 33 units. No parking required, okay? Now, here's where it interfaces with the economic. Remember that whole thing about the corners? Well, now, I'm a developer and I say, you know what? I want a retail store here, this new building that I'm building. So I'm gonna go to the City Planning Commission and ask them to put a 2,500 square foot retail store on the first floor. The yellow. That's what this is about. This is about new buildings in low-density areas to allow commercial inside of them, in the middle of residential communities, period. Similarly, another one, campus commercial. They put a picture of a NYCHA housing there, and they tried to sell it that this was for public housing. It's not. It would be allowed on 1.5 acres or more in any residential zone. That may not be an issue in this community board, but I guarantee you it's an issue throughout the city, particularly in boards 11 and 13 in Queens, Rockaways, Staten Island, the Bronx, etc. Any property that's 1.5 acres or more, and that could be split between a street, it could have multiple parcels in the same ownership, they'd be allowed 15,000 square feet of commercial. 15,000 square feet of commercial. Okay, same thing, only the City Planning Commission would have to do that. So, just briefly, this is Bayside. How many of you know Bayside? So this is Bell and Northern. These are the commercial areas on Bell and Northern. Just west of Bell is an area called Bayside Manor. It's a little apartment complex, a garden apartment complex. Classic garden apartment complex. See all that garden? Yeah, that's overrated. Green space, not needed. So what they would do is you would look at this area. The areas in yellow are the gardens that are there. The current zoning only allows a building that's 33 feet tall. Most of the property is already at their maximum build out. Okay? So this property, right here, you can't really see it here because it's light, but under the basic zoning, the building would be allowed to be 12 feet higher than it already is, and they would bump up the FAR, the floor area ratios. Now, you've got a 40-foot high building, 45-foot high building. If you're in a transit zone, which it is, it goes to a 1.5, so now you've got a bulky 45-foot building. And if you're on the new campus infill, which this is, now your building goes to 55 feet tall with a 1.5. And now you can put in 15,000 square feet of commercial at the first floor. Okay? And that's other buildings on the same property. As I said, City of Yes infill and proposal number 15 will take the garden out of garden apartments. Okay? So, let's briefly look at Forest Hills, your neighborhood. This is the southern part of Forest Hills. You have some sub-areas. You have Forest Hills Gardens, obviously. The Van Court neighborhood, which is what we're sitting in right now. Okay? There's the gardens in orange. There's Van Court. And your zoning. And this is the zoning that Claudia and other people in the community worked so hard to get. R2, that's your single-family zone. Why was Van Court made R2? Because it's almost entirely single-family homes on 40 by 100 or larger. And by having the zoning there, it made it easier for the community to not have to go and enforce the deed restrictions that are there, just like Forest Hills Gardens, which has its own private deed restrictions, right? So they were matching the zoning to the deed restrictions to a large degree, so that you don't have to go to court all the time and spend money, okay? R3A, 1 and 2 family zoning, detached. R3X, 1 and 2 family zoning, detached. R4B, who lives in the Tudor housing? The Tudors between Yellowstone and 68th Avenue. The area in green. The row houses. Okay, I see some. Okay. So that's R4B, that's the ones that make sure that you have the rear parking, the alleys, with the green space in front to stop people from paving over that green space. Okay? And R3-1, which is semi-attached 1 and 2 families, and R3-2 and R4, which are low-density multifamily zoning. So, again, that's just calling out Forest Hills Gardens and Van Court. So the yellow is your 1 family, the orange is your 2 family, and the red is your low-density multifamily. All of the 1 and 2 family would become 3 family plus, just as the baseline. And the multifamily would remain multifamily. See those darker areas? That's your transit zone. About 60% of your area is in the transit zone. That means they can build an apartment building there. Again, those are your deed restricted areas.
Call out the street there, please.
Sorry?
Call out the street there.
Basically where we're standing is the southern end of it, and it goes all the way up to the railroad tracks. All the way from Union Turnpike to the railroad cut on this side, where they want to build the Queensway. Right, so it's everything. This is Metropolitan Avenue down here. That's Metropolitan Avenue down here. So it's basically 80% of the area north of Metro is in the transit zone. Those red streets, that's 71st Avenue, Ascan, Union Turnpike, Yellowstone Boulevard, those are your wide streets, which means every property can have an apartment building on it.
Does that mean even in the gardens?
Absolutely.
But they're covenant restricted.
They are. We're going to talk about that. So that's the transit zone. Let me show you your existing commercial overlays. Metropolitan Avenue, a little bit on Yellowstone Boulevard, etc. Here's an example of what would happen if proposal number 16 happens. That's all the parcels where a 2,500 square foot retail commercial storefront office could go. Okay? And then the town center zoning, so again, accessory dwelling units, transit zone, town center zoning is zoning where they would allow up to 4 stories of apartments above a commercial strip. On every commercial strip in an R1 through R5 zone. So, Metropolitan Avenue, you have mostly on Metro, you have 1 and 2 story buildings, right?
Yeah.
So that would be an area where you'd have perhaps up to 5 stories on those blocks, 4 to 5 stories. And I give an example here. This is the German restaurant on Yellowstone. So this just gives you an idea of what could happen. That's a fairly accurate representation. I'm not an architect, but that's the massing.
And with no parking.
No parking. No parking required.
Where the Shalimar was when they did.
Where the Shalimar was, you got it. So, you know, I like to tailor these a little bit to your own community, so you can see a little bit of what, I've done this is like my 83rd presentation in the last 6 months. So. But I wanted to show you something you can see every day and go, oh my God, they could build that here, right? And that would be as of right. As of right. So, you know, one of the things that everybody should know, and by the way, this is the old transit zone map from 6 months ago when they first came out with this for Community Board 6. That's the new map. So half of Rego Park, most of the crescents, and this whole area of Forest Hills, and then on the other side, the Court Meyer section, all in the transit zone.
Ignore me.
I can never ignore you, Claudia. Just wanted to show you that. I want to show you something else, if that's okay. Do you see this map? The darker the blue, the higher the home ownership rate. Okay? Queens and Staten Island, Southern Brooklyn, and the North and East Bronx. We are the owner-occupied communities of New York City. New York City is 1/3 owner-occupied. But the vast majority of it is in our communities, mostly 1 and 2 family communities. Co-ops and condos as well. This is the focus of the City of Yes. We are the target. The target is on our backs. It is to get rid of owner-occupied neighborhoods and replace them with market rate rental housing. Nothing affordable about this. City planning confirmed this multiple times, and they did it again last Wednesday when people said, so if I build an ADU in my backyard, that's not affordable? Nope. If I build an apartment building in a transit zone, that's not affordable? Nope. They have affordability in the high density areas, but all it is a 20% bonus on what they're already building. It's nothing spectacular. The low density zoning is meant to be densified. That is the goal, and replace owner-occupied housing with rental units. Okay? We also happen to pay 300 to 400% property tax rates than the richest parts of the city of New York. Greenpoint and Williamsburg, Brownstone, Brooklyn, Manhattan, we're paying 300 to 400% property taxes. I didn't know any of this until 6 months ago. The property taxes in the city of New York, which make up about 40% of the budget, single-family homes pay the largest portion of them. Single-family homes. They want to destroy single-family homes, and yet we are the cash cow for the city of New York. So, one of the things that we have done is, based upon this, we don't have too many options. Option number one, we get 26 votes on the city council. We have 51 council members. We have 26 votes, and we kill the city of Yes. Great. And we live to fight another day. 26 votes, yes, we sit back and accept our fate. Because once it's done, it's over. In that case, maybe we sell our homes and move. I don't know where to, but either we take it or we leave. And the fourth is a bill called Assembly Bill 9417. And this bill would allow any community who is not happy with this situation, is not happy in general with what's going on here in the city, which is a whole other issue. But if you don't want this and we can't stop it, this might be our only escape without moving. And that is a bill that would allow a place like Forest Hills to remove itself from the rest of the city. And this is actually aimed statewide. This is not just for here. It's not Staten Island. I want to explain this to you. Staten Island was, we're going to take the county and become our own county. That's not what this is. This would allow any community with 2,000 people or more, anywhere, to create their own town. And that's different, because one thing you got to think about is, how many people live in Forest Hills, in your section of Forest Hills? Any idea, guys? It's, between, here we go. It's number 7. 28,915 people. So let's call it even 30,000, okay? You have 11,000 housing units and you're 61% owner-occupied, which is, by the way, the national average is about 63%. So you're right there. Citywide average, 33%. Any area. Now remember, our communities are floating the city, right? We are not net takers of tax money. We are net givers. Everybody talks about how New York State is always giving, they're getting back 37 cents on the dollar that they give to the federal government. Well, our communities are in a similar situation, right? I have actually done my homework. I looked, because occasionally we get skeptics. I've looked at places like Rockville Center, Garden City, Valley Stream, Port Washington, comparable places to here, to Whitestone, to St. Albans, similar kinds of economics. We are paying more per square foot in taxes than they are, way more. Everybody says, oh, Nassau County is so expensive. Yeah, if you move to Sands Point. But when you actually look at the numbers, it's not that bad. In addition, if we leave the city, we don't pay New York City income tax. I don't know how many people here do, but I sure do. So, again, desperate times call for desperate measures. This is not something I was ever thinking about 6 months ago. But the city is backing our communities into a corner. And we have to do something. We either have to stop this madness from happening, or we have to take serious action. All of these people right now, and I'm nonpartisan, okay, I'm not saying this for one person or another. The Assembly and the senators are all running for re-election right now. And as soon as this is done, whether it's up or down, City of Yes, the council members, the mayor, the public advocate, and the control, they're all running for re-election as soon as this is over. So it's really important to be engaged. And again, hey, you may be one of these people who thinks it's a great idea. I don't know. I'm just giving you the information. How many people think this is a good idea? You think it's a good idea? Okay. Anybody else? Who doesn't think this is a good idea? Okay. Sorry, you're outvoted, sir. My point is, there are people who are going to think this is a good idea. They're going to make a lot of money on this. But the misery that the rest of us are going to have to deal with is unbearable. So, at that, I open it up to questions. Liz?
Could you talk a little bit about the private communities like Forest Hills?
Absolutely. If I can have a sip of water first, because I've been talking nonstop for about 40 minutes.
And also,
Yes.
the explosion in density, how will it change our sanitation needs, school needs?
Okay.
Sewer needs.
Police,
So,
security?
Let me start with the first question, the second question first. So the question was, how will this increased density affect our sewer, water, infrastructure, police, fire, schools, you name it? The answer is, it will affect it horribly. And the other statement is, no, we're not getting anything. In fact, in their document, which I have right here, this is their own document, if I can find it here, hold on. Here we go. In the very end of the document, they say something very interesting. Conclusion. Environmental review. They are actually not analyzing anything that they're doing here, which is shocking to me. I'm a planner. The first rule of planning is, and again, anybody who went through rezonings like Claudia knows, you gather the data, you analyze it, you have your goals, and you see if the data meets the goals. And then you make a decision. There is no analysis of data. They are coming up with 15 theoretical models, and they are plugging every neighborhood into those theoretical models. That's all they're doing. And they admitted as such at the community board meeting last Wednesday. You see, representative neighborhoods selected as, quote, prototypical for a neighborhood scale analysis to analyze collective effects of the proposal for density-related technical areas. Now, I've already studied Kew Gardens, Jamaica Estates, Laurelton, and Douglaston and Little Neck, and Ridgewood. And I can tell you that their laughable response, they're stating that this proposal will only generate less than 1 unit per acre over 15 years. This is an impossibility. A range between 58,000 and 109,000 units in 15 years. Now, the mayor has said over and over, just a little more housing in every neighborhood. That's his little jingle, right? 100,000 units divided by 59 community boards, which is what we have. 1,700 units per community board divided by 15 is 120 units per year per community board. We don't need a zoning change for that. The zoning we have today, if we never touched it again, believe it or not, could accommodate another 8 to 12 million people. It is extremely flexible as it is today. So these numbers are garbage. They are totally bogus, okay? I looked at Jamaica Estates. I looked at what they proposed, and I plugged in everything, and I did an analysis of every property. It's a 500% increase in units. And that's just for one small neighborhood. Same with Laurelton. Same with Kew Gardens. Same with Douglaston and Little Neck. And even Ridgewood, which you'd think is a pretty dense neighborhood, it's like a 350% increase in Ridgewood. So this data is nonsense. And when you're doing an environmental review, you have all of these different things that you're supposed to look at. They're saying that there will be no impact on land use, zoning, public policy, socioeconomic conditions, water and sewer infrastructure, solid waste and sanitation, energy, greenhouse gases and climate change, air quality, public health, and most importantly, neighborhood character. There will be no effect on neighborhood character. Okay, so I think you see we are in a fantasy world of planning, because this isn't a plan, this is a deconstruction of planning. But they hold the levers of power, so as I said, you only have a few options onto how to act. Now, the second part of your question. I represent numerous deed-restricted communities in New York City. I represent Broadway Flushing, homeowners, Bayside Gables, I've worked with Douglas Manor, Westmoreland, these are all the Rickard Finley communities in Northeast Queens. And I've had meetings with the Forest Hills Gardens recently. I actually brought them to speed on this. And the statement I make is this: deed restrictions are great as long as you can enforce them. And to enforce them, it costs money. And when the zoning doesn't match the deed restrictions that much, you're going to be spending a lot of money on lawsuits. Now, some areas are more well-heeled than others. Some are one lawsuit away from falling apart. Others can probably survive a number of lawsuits. But at the end of the day, developers have really deep pockets. They can make litigation go on for years. And again, I've never lost a case, ever. I'm not a lawyer, but I've been involved in over a dozen deed restriction cases. Never lost a case, but they cost a lot of money. A lot of money. Do you guys know the Kew Forest neighborhood? Do any of you remember the battle that happened there 25 years ago? Not the new building going on the back there. That area, the reason there are still single-family homes there, it was zoned to R6. And in 1998, a developer bought a 50 by 100 corner property. Sorry? No, no, not that one. Not on Austin Street. No, this was on Kew Gardens Lane. He bought a house, 50 by 100, and filed plans for a 7-story apartment building. That was allowed under the R6. And I said to this community that I met more than 25 years ago, I said, you know, I think you guys have deed restrictions. And they did the research. They found all the deed restrictions for all 65 homes. They went to court, got a temporary restraining order. The developers kept working, threatened to kill them. And then the buildings department refused to stop them. And then the sheriff showed up. And the sheriff said, if you don't leave that site in 5 minutes, you're all arrested, and I'm seizing all of your construction equipment. And 3 years later, not only did the community win and enforce those deed restrictions, but the order was to remove the foundation and rebuild a single-family home. And then the city rezoned those 63 houses R2. It was an incredible case, okay? That, in 1998, cost $260,000. That was 26 years ago. I'm just saying, it's not impossible, but it costs a lot of money. So that's my answer to you, miss. Questions? Sir?
Ostensibly, they're proposing this because they need housing, or so they say.
So they say.
Or so they say. Yet on the other hand, you have people fleeing New York in droves.
Correct. 300,000
people, I think it was, with families left in the last
600,000.
600,000. So how do you square the fact that they're doing this because they need more housing, yet people can't get out fast enough?
You don't. Logic is not in play here. So at this meeting last Wednesday, and I don't know if everybody heard the gentleman's question, I'll just repeat it very quickly. He said, given the fact that the city is saying we need housing, and this is the drumbeat that's been going on now for 3.5 years, we need housing, and yet lots of people have left the city, 600,000 people in the last 5 years. You know, how did they justify this? So at this community board meeting, the question came up. Why do we need all this housing? And what did they do? They gave census information from 2010 to 2020. They did not look at the numbers from 2020 to 2024, which is the reality of the situation, right? As I said, they're picking and choosing their data. They're making all sorts of propaganda and rhetorical statements. Does anybody know why